Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF. This is episode 230 called Weir Casey. And now a word from our sponsor. Attention all aspiring fertility coaches and those on their own fertility journeys. Are you ready to take charge of your dreams and create a pathway to parenthood? Introducing the Fertility Coach Academy certification, the ultimate program designed to equip you with the skills and knowledge to become a successful fertility coach. The focus at Fertility Coach Academy is the holistic well-being of individuals and couples on their fertility journeys. They address their emotional, physical, and spiritual needs through the proven Creation Continuum Foundation approach. They also provide comprehensive business coaching, helping you build a thriving practice and make a real impact in the lives of those struggling with fertility challenges. The Academy understands the challenges of the conception journey. That's why they also offer personalized one-to-one coaching packages with internationally renowned fertility coach Elizabeth King. Elizabeth's mind, body, and spirit approach through the Creation Continuum uncovers hidden blocks, empowering you to achieve your goal of parenthood. For all of you Infertile AF listeners, here's the best part. A special 25% discount on the Fertility Coach Academy certification or one-to-one fertility coaching is available to you now. Just mention the code INFERTILEAF when enrolling and you'll receive this exclusive offer. Ready to turn your passion for fertility into a purpose-driven career? Visit fertilitycoachacademy.com. You'll be empowered to make a difference while embracing the mind, body, and spirit approach. Or are you seeking personalized guidance on your own journey? Visit elizabethking.com. Unleash your potential and unlock the doors to parenthood. Remember, guys, use code INFERTILEAF on both of those for your special 25% discount. This podcast is sponsored by RECEPTIVA DX. RECEPTIVA DX is a powerful test that has helped thousands of women who have experienced recurrent pregnancy loss or IVF failure. The test helps detect inflammatory conditions of the uterus that might be preventing you from becoming pregnant or staying pregnant. The most common underlying condition of a positive RECEPTIVA DX test is endometriosis with or without symptoms. If you or someone you know has struggled with IVF, RECEPTIVA DX may give you the answer and treatment protocols that you're looking for. Talk with your doctor about RECEPTIVA DX because the journey is so worth it. Plus, guys, Infertile AF listeners are getting $75 off the RECEPTIVA DX test. So all you have to do is go to receptivadx.com or download the app RECEPTIVA DX, use code INFERTILEAF23, and you'll get $75 off. Thanks, RECEPTIVA DX. Okay, guys, so no matter who you are, no matter what your journey is, no matter what path you're going down, I really think you're going to love my guest today. It's Weir Casey. She is an ARTOG. She's the original fertility advocate. She is the author of a book called Unstoppable. She went through IVF in the 80s. She paved the way for so many of us, me included, and everybody listening today by doing research. And she's doing research in the library using microfiche, which we talk about. And if you're old like me, you know what that is. You know, when she had her baby via IVF in the 80s, it became an international news story because it was so groundbreaking. It was so experimental. And she's seen it all. She's worked with some incredible doctors. She really went through all these kind of, experimental procedures and surgeries. She was the first to do many different things. She's just so interesting and so cool and such a badass. Her name is Weir Casey. You are going to love this. This is such an important conversation, just like I said, no matter what you're going through. So listen to this one, pass this one on. Ellen, you are, thank you. Just thank you for everything that you did. Guys, without further ado, this is Ellen's infertility story. Oh my gosh. Weir Casey. Hi, how are you?
I am wonderful. I'm so happy to meet you.
I'm so happy to meet you too. I feel like we've been talking for a while, virtually DMing and emailing and all this stuff, but this is our first face-to-face. So I'm really happy to have you on the show. You are such a pioneer in this community and in this industry. You have written this book that we're going to talk about called Unstoppable: Forging the Path to Motherhood in the Early Days of IVF. So you're like an OG. Um, how do you feel about, being one of the first?
Well, it's given me a remarkable platform to share information. Both when my baby was born, I shared information about IVF when no one knew what it was. And now I am also able to help a new generation of young families who are trying so hard to have a baby.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I have a million questions for you. I always like to start, though, at the beginning and ask, did you always want to be a mom?
I did. I was the child in all of the family movies, walking around carrying one of the baby cousins. And my career was being a kindergarten and first grade teacher. So I love children. They've always been, women and children have always been the center of my life.
I love that. So tell me about, what did you know about having babies growing up? What was your sex education and all that? What were you taught?
Oh my goodness. Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing at all. We knew,
okay.
No, nothing. We went to the health museum.
Really? Where did you grow up, Ellen?
I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland called Shaker Heights.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so we looked at diagrams of the female body. We never saw a diagram of the male body, God forbid. The 60s, we never saw that. So no. And I still feel that sex education needs so much work. Girls need to know just how to prevent pregnancy, but they need to know about their own fertility life.
Absolutely. There's so many holes in it, even now still. And I think, people like you that are writing books and going on tours and talking about this, making such progress, but that we have such a ways to go for, the women who are coming up behind us. So when you started, fast forwarding a whole bunch, what did it look like when you, started to try to have a family?
Oh my goodness. Big question. Well, first of all, let me tell you that the reason I had a problem conceiving is because I had been given, when I was in my young 20s, I'd been given an IUD that was not approved by the FDA, but a doctor in Colorado Springs was testing it. And so he had me sign a release, and I happily did, thinking that I would help other young women prevent pregnancy. Well, he should never have given that to me ever. And I had never, I wasn't even married, so he should never have given that to me. But within 2 months, I had a raging internal infection.
Oh, wow.
And it resulted in extreme scarring of my entire peritoneal cavity and occluded both fallopian tubes completely. But I didn't know.
Oh my gosh. So were there other people that had this IUD as well? Was it, or were you?
It was being tested. I would assume yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I have no idea.
How many years later did you realize that was such an issue? Or was it when you got the infection, you were like, this is the problem, we need to get this removed?
Oh, immediately they had to remove it. I had a very high fever and I was in extreme pain. So I had to go to the emergency room.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very bad. But again, I wasn't married. I wasn't ready to have children. But in the back of my mind, I always thought, uh-oh.
Oh, wow. So that could have been something that really affected your fertility.
Yes, I just always thought so. But there was a dearth of information in those days about anything to do with reproduction, contraception. So, but I always had that in my mind that it could be a problem. And
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about how that played out. Like, did you get married and how old were you? And, what was your plan family wise?
Yes, I got married when I was 29 years old, and we immediately wanted children because in the 70s, 29 was really old. And so I never used contraception at all. And after about 3 months, I thought, uh-oh. So I went to a doctor. I never said anything to my husband. I went to a doctor who did the hysterosalpingogram. And I remember lying there looking at the dye on the screen, stopping. It just filled up the shape of the uterus, which was the shape of a heart, which I thought was rather poignant.
Yes.
And then I thought quite superciliously said, well, hey, I'll just keep pushing if you want me to, and see if I can just pop these open.
Oh gosh. Okay. So there were some blocked tubes. That was what was going on.
Yes. And so he tried harder and it was agonizing.
Oh my
And
gosh.
of course they didn't pop. And
Yeah.
then this doctor said, "Oh, no problem. I'll open those tubes for you."
Okay.
And
Like
I,
right then and there or later?
no, he said, "I can do that." And again, I had read nothing about blocked fallopian tubes, but I knew he couldn't do it. This was a local gynecologist in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I thought, I just think this needs a specialist. So I thanked him very much and walked out of his office, never to return.
Mm-hmm.
I went to my regular, a new gynecologist, and said, I need to find someone who can help me.
Mm-hmm.
So there was only one. Infertility was not even a word.
It wasn't.
No.
So what were they saying? What were they calling it? Like, was there any sort of diagnosis, or is just like, you're not getting pregnant?
You're not getting pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting, there's no way you can get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So I found the one doctor in the state of Colorado at that time who was a fertility specialist.
Wow. Who was it?
Betts, Dr. Betts.
Okay.
Yeah, at the University of Colorado. So I drove to Denver, went to him, and he already knew. I had sent all my records to him. So he knew the problem. And I was so relieved I didn't have to have another exam and more tests.
Mm-hmm.
But he handed me a piece of paper and he said, you need tubal surgery. And there are only two doctors, two surgeons in the world doing successful surgery on fallopian tubes.
In the world.
In the
God.
world. And guess who they were? One was Dr. Steptoe, the man who had facilitated the birth of the world's first test tube baby in England. And the other was Dr. Victor Gomel in Vancouver, Canada.
Okay.
So I went to Dr. Gomel in Canada, and he is now known as the father of microsurgery.
Wow. That's so cool. So nobody in the States even?
No.
Oh, wow.
Not being done at all.
Okay. So what year was this, Ellen?
This was in 1979.
Okay. Okay. And how old were you at that point?
I was 29.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you'd been trying and you figured out. Here's a question. Logistically, you said you sent your records. You just sent them in the mail. I mean, this is pre-email, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
So was everything on a longer scale of time? Like you had, nothing's instantaneous, right? They had to wait, get your records, process everything, all that. And I'd imagine that things were taking longer too, just in general.
Of course. But we didn't know, we didn't know what it would be like 30 years down the road.
Totally.
No, every single bit of research and communication I did was in the library.
Yep.
Research, phone calls to various doctors and clinics. And that's the only way I could do it. And I would write letters on my typewriter and put them in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
So everything did take a long time.
Yeah. It's so wild. I mean, that was when I was in college, that's when email kind of first started coming out. But when I was applying for jobs, when I was getting ready to graduate, I was sending out like hard paper, snail mail resumes and typing up letters. And so it's so funny how different it is. And like people today don't even know like that process. Like what's a stamp?
But one thing, however, that's really cool is that I saved all of the letters I received in response to mine.
Oh, wow.
I have files. I've always kept copious files, thank goodness, because now I have a remarkable archive.
That's awesome.
Earliest days of assisted reproductive technology.
Wow, that's so cool. Is there like an ART museum or anything? Because if not, there should be, and that all needs to go in there, right? Like the Smithsonian of ART.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
We should do that.
Let's do it.
I was recently in England 2 weeks ago at Bourne Hall, which is the original clinic founded by Dr. Steptoe and Dr. Edwards, who helped Leslie Brown conceive her baby, Louise Brown.
Okay.
They featured me at this celebration of IVF that they had.
So cool.
Oh my God. I was asked to bring my archives. So I took my original newspaper articles, and I have multiple copies of them. newspaper articles and letters and papers from my doctor telling me what shots to get and what medicine to take. So I took that all to England, where the world's most famous IVF physicians were in attendance. They were fascinated. And I gave them to Bourne Hall for their archives.
Oh, how cool.
Donated my archives, which was really exciting.
That's so incredible. I love that. I love that. So, okay, let's go back to the chronology of your story. So you had the tubal surgery? How'd it go?
I did. And it took Dr. Gomel 5 hours to open one fallopian tube using surgery.
So it was scar tissue that was the issue?
Yes, there was extreme scar tissue. And yes, quick fact, in order to publish my book, I had to get legal releases from each of my now very famous doctors who did surgery on me. So I sent the chapter about Dr. Gomel to him, and he immediately called me. He lived in Vancouver. Now he lives part-time in France. So he called me from Paris and said, Hélène, and he now has a French accent. Hélène, there is no way that I did surgery for 5 hours. That is simply incorrect. You must change it. And I said, Dr. Gomel, I have your dictated notes of my surgery.
You're like, I've got receipts. Those are called receipts today.
And so I got out his dictated notes of my entire surgery and sent them to him. The next thing I know, my phone was ringing again from Paris. Hélène, you are exactly right. It was a 5-hour surgery. This is unheard of.
Oh my God.
And by the way, he has received the Legion of Honor medal in France, which is the highest civilian honor given by Jacques Chirac. He is world famous. Cool. So then I came back to Colorado Springs, where I immediately got pregnant, but it was an ectopic pregnancy.
Oh, wow. Okay. So how did that go? Those can be really dangerous, as we know.
It was very dangerous. And this was now 1980, early 1980, and there was no way to diagnose an ectopic pregnancy. Ultrasound was not sophisticated enough, and there was not a quick blood test. So I felt that pain in my side that was a killer pain. I knew what it was.
Really? How did you know?
Because I had been researching in the library basement everything that I could find.
Oh my God. Okay.
Scar tissue in the reproductive system.
Right.
So I said, my husband and I were in the car, and I said to him, Peter, take me immediately to the hospital, because we didn't have a cell phone to use to call.
Right.
I knew we couldn't stop and use a payphone. I said, please go straight to the hospital. And Peter, if I pass out in the car, that means that my ectopic pregnancy has ruptured and I am in danger of dying.
Oh my God. Yeah.
This poor young guy in his 20s is looking at me like, what?
Oh my God. So tell me about sorry, go on.
No, I said it did rupture and I was in danger of dying. And
it did rupture.
Yes, it did rupture. Luckily, while I was at the hospital, but it was a life-threatening situation and very scary.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me about the state of, did you have anybody to talk to about any of this? I mean, obviously, again, this is pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, way pre, there's not message boards or, were there was anybody talking about this, Ellen?
Oh, such a good question. No.
Not one person.
No. In the 1980s, infertility, anything to do with women's health, miscarriage was never discussed in polite society. And I mean, never. I knew a couple whom, I knew socially who had adopted a child, but I had no idea why they needed to adopt a child. And people who didn't have children, well, you never wondered why. You just thought, oh, I don't know, but you would never have asked. So to answer your question, no, I was completely alone, which for me was a good thing because I'm an only child. So I'm used to being alone and handling things myself. I will also tell you, I did not dare talk to my doctors. I did not dare talk to my husband about how devastated I was to lose that first pregnancy.
Okay. Tell me why.
Well, at this time, it was we were living in a male dominated culture. There were no female obstetricians. I only had males, and I loved my doctors, but I would never have told them. Before I conceived my daughter, I already had 8 major surgeries, in 1983. So I never wanted them to know how this was killing me inside. I always acted cheery and positive and upbeat because any one of them, my husband included, could have pulled the plug and said, no, this is too hard on you. Let's just stop trying.
Wow.
So I never did. I was always in fear that one of the men in my life would say, oh, we're not going to do this anymore.
Okay. That's so interesting. So were you carrying like shame, or what were you feeling?
Oh.
Were you feeling depressed? And how was your relationship going? Were you just kind of like you said, just bury it down and smile and keep going?
Yes, that's exactly what I did. He knew I was devastated, but I smiled, and behind the scenes, outside of our marriage when we were together, I was in the basement of the library doing my research.
Yeah.
So I took care of it myself, and then I would present to him a new plan that I had. There is something called microfiche, which
I was just going to say that. Oh my God, you literally read my mind. I was just about to say, remember microfiche? It would give you a headache if you spun it too fast, because it would go by so fast.
You're right. It did. It gave me a stomach ache.
Yeah.
I sat in the library basement. At first, I would go through the Reader's Guide to Periodicals and find all the medical journals that mentioned the word fallopian tubes.
Mm-hmm.
There was nowhere else to research. And young women today have the opportunity of going online and talking to their physicians. I had no one. So I did it myself. After I'd found Dr. Gomel, then the next thing I found on microfiche was laser surgery, which again was completely unheard of. A doctor in Hartford, Connecticut was doing experimental laser surgery.
Okay.
I flew to Connecticut with my husband, and I was among his very first patients trying laser surgery on fallopian tubes.
Oh
but again, this was experimental, and it had a resulting effect of an infection that it caused.
Oh my God. So wait, were you hesitant to do another experiment after the IUD had gone so wrong?
No.
Okay.
No. And the microsurgery was also considered experimental. I was one of the first women in the world to have microsurgery.
You're such a badass, doing all this stuff before anybody else. And I feel like you're doing it because for the greater good, right? For the greater good of people coming behind you so that you can say, do this, don't do that. Was that how it felt?
It did. And I made a point of publicizing it as soon as I had my daughter for that exact reason. And I'm still able to publicize infertility treatments and how it feels to go through infertility now that I have written this book. Now I also have a new platform where people are interviewing me, and it's the worst. You know that. It's the worst to be a woman wanting a baby so badly and not able to have her baby.
Yeah. I've said that exact sentence so many times. It's the saddest thing is to want a baby and not be able to have one. It's so sad.
It is. And, I was in the earliest days of assisted reproductive technology, which I didn't realize the import of and how lucky I was about 30 years later. And then I thought, oh my God, I still do all of the world's most famous doctors. And not only do I know them, they've all done surgery on me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So okay, tell me what happened next. So you did the laser surgery.
I did the laser surgery, which resulted in a hydrosalpinx, which is an infected tube on the side that he tried to open. So that caused a terrible again, life-threatening situation with emergency surgery. Then I was left with no fallopian tubes and no way to ever get pregnant.
Mm.
So then I was at a dead end. Now,
Okay.
Louise Brown had been born in 1978, but I wasn't married in 1978.
Mhm.
And we never thought there'd be another test tube baby, which I'm using that term because that's what it was called.
That's what it was called. I remember, wasn't it? It's like the cover of Time magazine. There was like a big article about the test tube babies.
Yes.
And how it was just this new thing. It sounds so, that term sounds so antiquated now, don't you think?
It certainly does. It certainly does. But it's interesting because that defines my story, having a baby that no one even had a clue what it was.
Right.
Tell you that right after I had, no, not right after, actually, in 1981, a full year after I had the second loss of a fallopian tube, Elizabeth Carr was born at Eastern Virginia Medical School by the Dr. Joneses, who opened the very first IVF program in the United States. Again, it was completely experimental. But as soon as she was born, I thought, IVF is in America. I will have a baby.
Right. So Elizabeth Carr was the first one born in America, right?
She was, yes, in 1981. So I sat down at my electric typewriter, again, had to mail a letter to the Dr. Jones Clinic in Virginia, saying, please put me on your list, and sending him my information. But I got a letter back, return mail, saying we've already had 6,000 letters.
Wow.
And I was aware of how many other women were in my situation, something that there was no way of knowing until that letter came. And he said it would be a 3-year waiting period. But in the early days of IVF, you had to be under 34 in order to try IVF at all.
Under 34. Okay.
And legally married as well, which has certainly changed.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that would not fly today.
Oh, it wouldn't fly today. But really, that was only 30 years ago.
I know. It's so wild that this is such a new field and such a new medical, phenomenon almost. It's just, it's wild.
It is wild. And it's so cool to have been at the very beginning of it.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me what happened next with you guys.
So what happened next was I went to my doctor in Colorado Springs, whom I adored, Dr. John Smith, and he knew how much I had done. He had done surgery on me for 2 of my near-death experiences. And he one day called me at work, left a message. I want you to come to my office this afternoon. All right. So I hopped in the car, went to his office, where he greeted me with a big smile and handed me a hand-addressed envelope, manila envelope, full of all of my fertility files, all of my surgeries, everything he knew about me. And it was addressed to Dr. Martin Quigley, University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It said, this program was just approved by the government. It's the second IVF program approved to operate in the United States. I picked up the phone, he said, and called Dr. Quigley and told him about you and told him how much you wanted a baby, everything you had done, and he will accept you. All you have to do is Xerox your marriage license and put it into the envelope and then go to the post office.
Oh my God. Okay. Wow. That's exciting.
I know. I was one of the first patients in the United States to undergo experimental in vitro fertilization.
Okay. So tell me about leading up to that. What did you meet with him in person? Did you talk on the phone, or how did it all play out? And then I'd love to hear about the specifics, what was your protocol and how long did it all take and all that stuff. So let's start with the beginning. Those are a couple different questions, but how did you guys get the ball rolling with Dr. Quigley?
I drove home. We lived in the mountains, drove home, got our marriage license, drove back downtown to a Xerox machine where I could copy our marriage license, popped that into the mail that very day. Then I got a letter back saying that we would love to invite you to come to the University of Texas to have a screening laparoscopy to see if enough of the ovary was free of scar tissue where they could retrieve an egg, a ripe egg. That was the only time I cried in front of anyone, was at right before that surgery. And I was lying there thinking, oh my God, if this tube, if this ovary, either ovary was completely covered with scar tissue, I could never be a mother. I knew that was my end of the road. So I have a really poignant chapter in my book about exactly that time. And I was lying in surgery, in pre-op. And the nurse was not being nice. She was the only nurse I ever had who wasn't nice. And she goes, if you don't, she goes, I cannot get an IV because you are so upset. And now I wasn't crying. I was just lying there breathing like that. And I said, I wanted to say to her, you don't understand why I am upset. I have already had surgery 5 times trying to have a baby. And if this is a no, it's the end of the road for me. And she told the doctor that I was too upset to have an IV run. So he came out of surgery and talked to me. And he was so darling. And I had tears just kind of coming out of the corners of my eyes. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm not scared. I just want this to work. And it's so important to me.
This episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. You can skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh does more than just delicious dinners. Not only can you take your pick from 40 weekly recipes, but you can choose from over 100 items to round out your order, from snacks and easy lunches to desserts and pantry necessities. Everything arrives in one box on a delivery day that you choose. No worries, guys. If you're not a pro in the kitchen, HelloFresh's foolproof recipes arrive pre-portioned and easy to prepare in just a few easy steps. I have personally tried and loved HelloFresh. It saves time, it makes cooking so easy and fast, and everything I've tried from HelloFresh is super delicious. So here's the thing. Go to HelloFresh.com/InfertileAF16 and use code InfertileAF16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. I mean, I don't know if it gets any better than that. Again, you can go to HelloFresh.com/InfertileAF16 and use code InfertileAF16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. I know everybody listening is looking for fresh, easy, healthy meals. So guys, please check out HelloFresh and make sure that you check out America's #1 meal kit.
Anyway.
Yes. Oh, wow.
Anyway, and then it was even worse when I came out of that surgery. I was in a fog, and the nurse, a nurse, stood at the bottom of my bed, and she was reading the report to me. I said, "Did it work?" And she goes, "Let's see, 40% and 60%." And I thought, "Oh no, no, it wasn't 4. Well, whatever. It was 80 and 60." And I thought, "Oh my God, it's not. I can't have it. It's over." And then the doctor came back, and I was so sad. And he said, "Well, I don't know why you're sad, because you have 80% of one ovary clear and 60% of the other. So I can definitely try in vitro on you."
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow.
And then the rest of the story, of course, is my in vitro.
Yes. Okay.
Sure.
So let's talk about that. What were the next steps with the in vitro? What was the drug protocol like in those days? And what year was this now? When was it?
Now we are in 1982.
Okay.
1982. And I'd started this in 79. So I had been having surgery and testing all of those years.
Wow.
Yeah. So then this program, I would say, is the model of patient care. And my book is unique in that the second half of my book is only describing what happened in the in vitro program in Houston. They were took such good care of me, and they were so careful with my psyche. For instance, when Peter and my husband and I walked into the in vitro office, there was no one else in the waiting room because, of course, no one knew it existed. And we walked up to the window and I said to the receptionist, Ellen and Peter Casey for Dr. Quigley. She looked right in my eye and she said, oh, you're Dr. Quigley's new patient. Congratulations.
Oh, wow.
So my blood pressure dropped 100% when she said congratulations, because she was already letting me know that they knew this would work. And that is the attitude they had the whole time. They were lovely to me. The protocol was Clomid.
Okay. Clomid.
But
Okay.
they could do that with me because I had no other underlying issues with becoming pregnant and carrying a pregnancy. None of the testing and the diagnoses that are done now, which are so wonderful, existed then. So just Clomid. That's all I had was Clomid. And then we flew to Texas, and they never told me that they had other young women pregnant until I was waiting to go in for the surgery to remove the eggs.
Okay.
Told me, all they did was they would tell me at the end of each day. Well, all right, I should tell you. Okay, Clomid. So then I went down to Houston, where I stayed for 2 weeks. My husband stayed in Colorado to work. So every single day, I got on a bus at the little Holiday Inn where I was staying and went up to the Health Science Center, where they took blood, huge amounts of blood, as you all know, every single day. And I was met at the elevator by a special nurse practitioner who took me in. I was treated as a part of a team, which is unusual now. I hope they will go back to this. I was treated as part of the team. They always said, you don't even have to stop at the desk. You just come right into the back room and we're all together. And they would sit and chat with me while they were taking blood. So it was a very collegial feeling. That same nurse practitioner walked me to the ultrasound doctor, who did an ultrasound of my ovaries every day. She stayed with me the whole time. And here's a cool story. This was so new. No one knew how IVF worked, including some of the doctors who were trying it. And my ultrasound doctor said, Ellen, I have a question. May my wife come tomorrow and see me doing ultrasound in an ovary? Because she's never seen this.
Wow. Yeah.
So she came in and it was really exciting because the day she was there watching him, he found a cumulus inside of the follicles where he could see the actual egg, which was
cool.
at that time brand new. So he took a Polaroid photograph for me of the cumulus.
What is a cumulus?
A cumulus is where you can see the actual egg.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So that was, and she was thrilled. He was thrilled. Everyone was so excited to be a part of this brand new technology.
Right. So how did you feel like, again, you're not really talking to anybody about this, or had you shared this with friends and family at this point, or was it kind of hush hush? My
mother knew. My aunts knew, and they called me. They were darling. And my best friend in Colorado Springs knew. But it wasn't that I was keeping it hush hush. It was just that I didn't want any distractions. I wanted to focus completely on my body and my health while I was in vitro. I had the sense, just an internal sense, that it was important for me to focus only on myself right then. And I did. The whole time I was at the hotel in Houston, I read the book, The Power of Positive Thinking.
Okay.
All I did was read that book and then focus on being calm. And then later visualizing that embryo implanting. And I do think that today young women go through so much in vitro. So they have so many shots they have to give themselves. There are so many tests, and it's like a revolving door. And I feel that is difficult, terribly difficult on your psyche and your body. So
yeah, absolutely.
I hope, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I hope that my book, in fact, I know that my book is now suddenly gaining extreme traction in the medical community, because they are now going back and studying the patient experience that I had in two places. One was in Vancouver with Dr. Gomel, and the other was in Dr. Martin Quigley's initial IVF program. Again, it was experimental, but the way they treated me there was remarkable. I was treated again as part of a team, absolutely positive all the time.
So was there anything else that they were telling you to do lifestyle wise? Like, were there like vitamins you were taking? I guess supplements probably wasn't even really a term back then, was it? I feel like vitamins was like the term, right? Like, what did they tell you to do? Like, eat certain things, stay away from certain things. What was the lifestyle kind of protocol?
There was no protocol. This was experimental. That's what's fascinating.
Okay. So what did you do? Like taking it into your own hands?
I took really good care of myself. Before I went to the IVF program, I immediately stopped drinking wine with the girls. I've always exercised, and I luckily always have had a very healthy diet. So that is all I did. And I just kept myself positive, and calm. There was no protocol. No, they didn't. In fact, let me tell you how I know they knew nothing. In fact, these doctors were making transatlantic calls to each other.
Yeah.
Dr. Quigley would call Dr. Steptoe in England and say, okay, tell me about the culture that you are using in the Petri dish for the fertilized embryo. How are you changing it? Because they were still tweaking it, trying to figure out what worked.
Right.
Oh, after I'd written my book and had gotten back in touch with the wonderful Dr. Quigley, my hero, I talked to him on the phone sitting outside in the summer, and I said, I have a question for you. Were you treating me so carefully and not telling me what would happen the next day until the afternoon before, so I would stay calm? Because that's what I thought. And he goes, no, we didn't know what was going to happen the next day.
He's like, we're all in this together. This is new to everybody.
And it was actually very fun to feel that I was a part of this.
Totally. So tell me about the actual retrieval. What were like how many eggs did they get and all that stuff? And what was the process as you waited for them to see what happened?
Oh, there were 5 eggs retrieved, and they put them all back in because there was not a concern of multiple birth at all that early. They hoped for was a pregnancy.
Okay. When did they put it back in?
All right, let's see. The embryos stayed in the incubator and were examined once a day in the morning for 36 hours.
Okay.
Then they were transferred back in.
Got it.
And that was the magical moment. And, one of the things, I'll tell, this is something we will discuss, I hope, was the pressure I was under once I had my baby, because I spoke to the public. It was my goal to educate the public and families hoping to have a baby, what in vitro fertilization was. But I was asked terrible questions like, this is a purely clinical and laboratory-based conception. There is no love in this. God would hate this. I mean, there was a huge...
Yeah. How did you deal with all the haters?
Oh, you have never known anybody as nice as me in that situation. Because I had a responsibility. I felt very, very strongly to tell what in vitro was, to explain what my test tube baby was. I took this on. It was an overwhelming personal obligation for me to do. As soon as I became pregnant, I called my doctor in Texas and said, I will speak to anyone you want me to speak to. I will speak to bioethics attorneys. I will speak to prospective patients in experimental IVF. I will speak to the press. And I did. And I was in a book called New Conceptions. And I was interviewed for that when I was just about 6 months pregnant. So I could tell her what IVF was, how it worked. And the minute my baby was born, I went live. Yes,
doing the
because
press tour.
I had to do it. I wanted to do it. No one knew what this was. I've got so many hysterical stories. I started educating people while I was still pregnant. I was in the grocery store at 9 months pregnant, very, very pregnant. And the lady behind me said, "Oh, is this your first baby?" "Yes, it is," I said. And then I said, "This is a test tube baby." And she went, "Oh, where is the baby growing?" I was not pregnant. But that showed no one knew.
Yeah, the lack of information. So wait, okay, let's backtrack a little bit. Was that first transfer, how many embryos did you say that they put in?
5.
5 embryo. Okay. And was that the one that worked? It worked that time?
No, no. The first transfer they had, I believe, 2 eggs. The first time I tried in vitro, and it did not work. We came back to Colorado devastated because I was positive it would work. It didn't. So then also I was a kindergarten teacher. So I had to plan all of my various surgeries, experimental surgeries around the world, around my vacations.
Right.
First time I tried it was in August and it didn't work.
Okay.
I was very sad. But of course, I am also very resilient. And I persevered through that sadness and called Dr. Quigley and said, "When can I come back?" So over Thanksgiving, it was my next vacation from being a teacher. So one afternoon, my husband was sitting on the couch in the living room, and I'll never forget the scene. I was standing in the middle of the living room looking at him, and I said, "Peter, Dr. Quigley said we can come back to Houston to try test tube baby procedure again in November." And he goes, "Ellen, we can't afford it." I mean, it was wildly expensive, still is, I know.
Yeah. Do you mind talking about the money aspect of it too I don't want to interrupt your story, but yeah. Okay.
So I burst into tears dramatically, ran up the stairs, got halfway up the stairs and thought, no. Turned around, came back in, stood in front of him and said, "I'm going. We'll figure it out."
Yeah. Good for you. I would have done the same thing. So what was the pricing like? I mean, insurance doesn't cover any of this, right? Because it's all experimental. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear about the financials.
I don't have them in front of me, but I do have all of my records. It was about $20,000. But the first time, this is pretty interesting, and I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Good one. They said to me, "Here's what we'll do," because the insurance companies have never heard of test tube baby procedure. "So here's what we'll do, so they'll cover it for you." So they sent in blood tests separately as just diagnostic tests. They sent in everything separately.
Oh, so cool.
The time I only paid for the doctor.
Good. That's amazing. You had a hack back in the day. I love it.
I know. Yeah, right.
That's awesome.
Oh, it was great. And then, okay, so let me tell you about after I had this baby. I was in touch with one news anchor in Colorado Springs. And I had told her this was going to happen and that I wanted her and her alone to cover it. So as soon as I had the baby, oh my goodness, the phone started to ring and PR people at the hospital said, "We're going to do a press conference." And I said, "No, we're not." I didn't want that much attention, but I did want to tell and celebrate that she'd been born. So I did one television interview and 2 newspaper articles. So the headlines of the newspapers around the country said things like, "It's a girl, test tube procedure results in successful birth," or
"Wow,
Colorado's first test tube baby born. And I have all of those articles, which is great fun.
That is so fun.
Then I began receiving requests from the press. to do interviews, and I accepted every request because I wanted to tell what this was.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you feel like it was your mission to just spread the word and help people? I mean, I feel like that's been your MO all along, right? It's
Always has been. In fact, I've been called the original fertility advocate.
Yeah, you're like the original influencer too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because I had two reasons, and one reason will surprise you. I did not want 5 years to go by and my little girl to start kindergarten with people looking askance at her.
Yeah.
Saying that's a test tube baby, because no one knew what it was.
Right.
So that was my personal mission, but other women and other couples needed to know that in vitro fertilization was happening in the US.
Yep.
There were 2 places, there would be 3, and then 4, and then more.
Yep.
But I wanted them to know. So my first interview, this was a good one. The first interview was a big program called People Are Talking, a live show based in Boston. I was sitting on a stage with a doctor from Harvard, a doctor from Women's and Brigham's, and a bioethics attorney and author who had written the book called New Conceptions. Well, the woman, the interviewer said, now, Ellen, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to first talk to this doctor and say, doctor from Harvard, tell me about this. Doctor from, Brigham and you tell me. And then she dismissed me with her hand. And she said, and then I'll, turn to you at the end and ask you to show, we'll look at pictures of your baby. And I thought,
what? Okay.
So it went live. The lights went on and she turned and leaned right into my face and said, wouldn't you say you're playing God?
Oh my God.
Oh,
what did you say?
Oh, no. Well, she wasn't going to rattle me after everything I'd been through. Trust me. And I said, oh, no. I thank God for the gifted scientists and physicians who've allowed me to have our baby.
Bravo.
Goes, you want to tell me that conceiving a child outside of the body isn't playing God? And I could see out of my peripheral vision, I could see the doctors and the attorney frozen. They just couldn't believe the way she was talking to me. And I was just so sweet. And I said, because my audience was watching me and I wanted to draw them into the point of understanding and caring about in vitro and how it helped us. So what I said was, oh no, this is no different than a heart bypass. This is simply bypassing the fallopian tube.
Good for you.
Yeah. So she got nowhere with me.
Yeah. She tried to rake you through the coals on that one. And you were like, no.
Oh, she
not
did.
letting it happen.
She kept going. Then she goes,
that's amazing.
She goes, you seem to think you know about this. Why don't you describe in vitro what a test tube baby is? And she was mean. So I did.
Wow. That's so disappointing when it's other women too that are doing stuff like that. Like, come on.
Yes. But I knew she was trying to create controversy to get people to watch her show. She was
right, of course.
So, and I knew what my mission was, and it was to stay kind and inform, because the people who were so negative about this and protesting the two IVF clinics that had started in this country, I believe came from fear. They're upset about it. There was a huge religious, ethical, and moral controversy surrounding this. In fact, one day I got a phone call from the news department at the local television station saying, Ellen, the Pope has just come out and we need you and said that in vitro fertilization is morally illicit. We need you to come to the station now. And I'm like, oh, God.
Wow.
It happened again. So I'm sitting there at the TV station and they said, are you saying the Pope is wrong? And again, you have to consider the audience, right? Instead of saying, yes, he is. I couldn't say that because I didn't want to offend the Catholic listeners, viewers. And I said, oh, no, but I am saying the Pope is misguided.
Oh, interesting.
I said, he doesn't know the love between a man and a woman who want their own child.
Right. So you had mentioned earlier talking about the pressure. And this is one of those moments, right? You've got a lot on your shoulders being kind of the face and the voice of this, one of the only people talking about it, if not the only person, right?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
And I was ready. I knew my facts. I knew exactly what I was talking about. And I wanted the other women out there who didn't have the education that I did to know how to sit in the library basement and find medicals, to know that, oh my gosh, you do still have a chance to have a baby. We have a new technology and it's working.
Right. Let's talk about your book.
Oh, good.
Why did you decide to write this when you did? And, what were the key takeaways that you want people to have, sharing this story? Again, it's called Unstoppable: Forging the Path to Motherhood in the Early Days of IVF. So I imagine that looking at the state of the industry now and IVF in general now, it's changed so much. So what did you want people to know about everything that you had gone through?
Well, I believe that it's important for women to know the stories of the women who went before them, who opened the doors that they can walk through now, who pushed those doors open and were iconoclastic, who bucked authority. I didn't let that first doctor do surgery on me, who did their own research and found the best people in the world. I just think it's so important for women to know the stories of women who went ahead of them not that long ago. I'm the age of most of your listeners' moms. So they were alive at that time. Anyway, that is why I wrote the book. I also realized my story is of great historical importance.
Yes.
This is women's history, again, operating in a time when men ruled the world.
Right.
And so this story needs to be told. Also, women today reading this will be fascinated by the fact that even though science and technology have changed so dramatically and it's so much more successful now, my feelings, my heartache, my devastation is exactly the same as theirs is now. Every time they have a loss or have such hope and it doesn't work. But I have a message that you can do this. Now, I want you to know my message isn't just in vitro will work, any of these different techniques will work. I covered every base. I was on we were on an adoption list. I went to the first surrogate parenting associates program operating in the United States. I did that as well. I had other options to have a child if I wasn't able to have one naturally.
So how has the response been from people? I'm sure you talk to people all the time who are just new to this world, who are, have read your book and appreciate all of the things that you've done to make it an easier road for people navigating it behind you. Tell me about some of the interactions you've had with women and men.
Oh my goodness, it's amazing. In fact, I just received a wonderful email from an OB in London who said, "You are a medical celebrity." And I loved meeting you. And I thought, I'm a medical celebrity. People are so fascinated by my story because now everyone knows what IVF is. But to read the story of trying a time when no one had even heard of microsurgery and laser surgery, my husband said, the only lasers I know about are in the movie Star Wars.
Totally.
And I'll tell you that I just returned from two parties that I was invited to in England. And I was invited by Bourne Hall, which is the first IVF clinic in the world, started by Dr. Steptoe and Dr. Edwards, who facilitated the birth of Louise Brown, the world's first test tube baby. I was invited to a party there to share my archives, to share my book, to be invited and introduced to the world's most famous and successful IVF clinicians and surgeons and scientists.
Yeah. Wow. That is good company to be in. So,
And my new friend is Louise Brown.
That's so cool.
The reason I was invited to this party is because the world's first test tube baby read my book.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you have to invite Ellen to England and let her talk to us. And
wow.
yeah.
So you had your baby in 1983. She was known as Colorado's miracle baby, right? Yes. How old is she? What's the math on that? How old is she today?
My darling, her name is Elizabeth.
40?
39.
39. Okay. I'm like doing the fast math.
Well, you were right. She turns 40 August 3rd.
Okay.
And she has never been able to dodge a question about her age because the press always comes to her birthday parties.
Oh, cool. So what does she think about this? What does she think about being this miracle baby?
You know what? It's just been her life. It's just been her life. I started telling her what in vitro was when she was an infant. So she always heard the term. She always knew she was special. Now, on her 10th birthday, I got a call saying, where can we land our helicopter? And it was NBC News. And I thought, ooh, your helicopter, huh? Why are you bringing a helicopter? And they said, we're coming to her birthday party. So she was interviewed there. And I thought, oh, I wonder what she'll say. But she was very together. And she said, I know how much they wanted me.
Oh,
and when she was tiny, I took her to meet one of my doctors who had written a book called Women and Doctors. And that's an interesting book. That's Dr. John Smith. And you might want to read that book. But so I took her in to meet him at the bookstore. And she said, Mom, I have a question. Is he the doctor who put me in or the doctor who took me out? She didn't know if it was her IVF doctor or my
That's so cool.
And reading my book, she cried. And she said, Mom, I always knew, but I didn't realize what you'd been through, you and Daddy, and what you'd been through and how hard it was. So she's really proud.
All right. Thank you so much to Ellen. Everybody check out Ellen's book. It's called Unstoppable. It's her memoir. And, she is, I'm sure I'll be working with her again because I just can't get enough of her. I feel like I could have talked to her forever, but I just want to thank her again for busting down all these doors for us, for sharing all this information. She went through so much loss and struggle and perseverance, and she's just so cool. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Definitely check out Fertility Rally if you're looking for a community and a safe space. We are here for you. We have hundreds of members. Everybody's going through different things, but the gist of it is that everybody wants to help. It is called the Worst Club with the Best Members. That's our trademark tagline, and it's true. I mean, everybody in our family is just incredible. So join us. Check us out on Instagram at Fertility Rally. You can check out our website, fertilityrally.com. We have monthly memberships. We have annual memberships. We have military memberships at a reduced rate. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And you can also always reach me on Instagram at Infertile Stories. And finally, if you have 2 seconds to rate and review this podcast, I would be so appreciative. So it really helps get more earballs to hear it. And I really thank you. All right. Love you guys. Have a good day.